Hello. For anyone who is watching, this is my second attempt to go live today. I wanted to talk to you about the glamping business, short-term rental, holiday rental, vacation rental review that I've been doing for the past year. So reviewing the past year. I haven't been doing it for a year, thankfully. Anyway, I wanted to share with you some of the outcomes of that review because I think by looking into the past and what's been happening, we can understand what might happen in the future, and we can tweak some of what we're doing to make sure that we are going to be able to do as best as we can with the business we have and the tools that we have. So let me just jump on over to my little presentation. This, I wanted to share with you a little bit about my view of, we are in the experiential travel world, and this is not just the structure, it's not the location, it's not just the services that you provide, all the customers that come to serve you, or your branding or marketing or anything like that. It's all of that, it's all of it. And that is essentially the experience that you're giving your guest. And so all of that will basically be showing everyone, your customers, guests, how you show up in the world and how you become a beacon to them and their guest bookings. So it's really interesting how this industry is growing right now and the things that are happening in the industry. At the moment, there are some incredible things being designed. So kind of new structures, new ways of being outdoors and staying in amazing places, amazing locations, having the most fantastic experiences. There's also some really kind of traditional things that are doing incredibly well as well. So let's have a little look at what's been happening in the industry so that you can understand what you might need to do. So I'm going to be looking at Europe, UK and USA and give you a little bit of a flavour of what happened. So I'm looking back at the summer just before, so June 2023. Because that kind of gives us an idea of what happened during those prime months. So this isn't talking about the shoulder season, this is just talking about those prime months. So this is what you need to know. There's an awful lot of potential in the industry in Europe. It's doing really, really well. Available listings were up. We saw the listings, they went up 10.4% year on year and 4% from 2019. So it's really interesting. 2019 is a really important year to focus on because that was the last full year before COVID hit that we can currently think of as in a normal year, a normal trading year. So this is why it's important to look back and compare it against 2019. So in Europe, available listings were up 10.4%, but demand was up 17.3%. So this was up 18.6% versus the normal year of 2019. So this is telling us that available listings were up 10%, but demand was up much higher than that, 17%. So in Europe, demand is higher than the supply. And in basic economics, that's really good because that means that there's more people wanting to book and wanting to become customers than there are the actual listings and the available locations. So there is still this kind of like energetic demand for holidays. So the average daily rates were up 17.9% year on year and 43.4% versus 2019. Revenue was up 38.3% year on year and 70% from 2019. I mean, that's pretty amazing. 70% up in terms of revenue. Occupancy was up overall 2.8% year on year and 4.7% versus 2019. So that's good. That's showing that it's growing in Europe. And revenue per available rental grew 21.2% year on year and was up 50.1% from 2019. That is pretty incredible. So if you are in Europe, if you are operating in Europe, I know a number of businesses who are, they're setting up glamping businesses, they're setting up all kinds of really interesting retreat style locations and retreat centers and everything else. And I think at the moment you can see that the picture is really good. So we'll move on now to, at a glance, the key United States short-term rental performance metrics for July 2023. So revenue per available rental declined slightly, 2.3% year on year, to $235.50. Available listings reached 1.51 million, so that was up 12.1%. So that's interesting. That is quite a big jump, a 12.1% jump in the number of listings, so the number of properties available across the board for people to book, so guests to book. Total demand nights rose 9.4%, so that's good. So the demand from the customer is rising, and occupancy was 1.3% lower year on year at 69.5% compared 8.6% versus 2019, our normal trading year. So this is really interesting. Occupancy was slightly lower. Why is that? When we're looking at the total demand of nights rose. So that could be a bit of an odd kind of quirk of the industry. It could just be people are preferring to book a longer number of nights, but the occupancy overall was lower. So it could just be out of season, shoulder season, everything else could be having an impact on that. It's very difficult to know exactly why that impact is there. But we can kind of make an assessment. And if you've got any thoughts, please comment underneath this video. I'd really like to know your thoughts about it. So the average daily rates declined by 1%, not much, but by some. And the nights booked increased 13.2% year on year. So again, there's some really interesting data there. US is definitely showing something different to the rest of the world. So now we come to the United Kingdom. Obviously, I support clients around the world, but the United Kingdom is obviously my home. It's where my heart is. So this is where I'm really interested. And I know from living here that it's a complex picture. There are so many influencing factors. And one of those obviously is weather. Weather has a massive impact on how things go in the UK tourism industry, particularly if we have a bad year. This year was particularly wet. That can impact because people just want to fly to the sun. It's the first time for many that they've been able to do that properly, feeling safe because of what's been going on with the pandemic over the years since 2020. But it's, you know, not everyone wants to do that. And some people are more environmentally minded and don't want to do that. But nevertheless, there are a lot of people who do. So they saw this as an opportunity to fly to the sun. They decided to do that. The cost of living and cutting down the number of holidays is something that's also having an impact. So whereas a family may have their one big holiday, depending on their budget, they may have a few. But they'll also have maybe a scattering of short breaks, maybe weekend breaks here and there. But that seems to be being seen as a luxury now with the backdrop of higher mortgage rates and everything else going on with the cost of living crisis. So people are cutting back on certain things, and some of that might be their shorter stays. So if you are a property that's offering stays, and in general, the people that book are shorter stays, maybe over the weekend and so on, you might find that you've had an impact this year on the number of people booking. Of course, there's always scaremongering in the UK with tabloids and everything else. So this means people may decide to do something different because they're being scared into doing that different thing, and that changes their behaviour. So that's something that also has an impact. And I looked into the Southwest Business Council that reported that visitor numbers are down 17% to 20% for the Southwest. Southwest is a very strong tourism area for the whole of the UK. So when we see things happening in the Southwest, we can assume something similar is happening in other parts of the world, other parts of the UK, excuse me. So that's something that is worth noting. And visitors, it's also reported, are believed to be spending less when they're in that area. So rather than going out and buying a big meal with their family, they're actually cooking it in the location where they're staying on holiday. So those are some really important influencing factors to pay attention to and think about, and maybe even think about how you could tailor your services to make the most of some of those. So, you know, are you offering value? Are you talking about the value you're offering in all the marketing you're doing? Are you thinking about the additional services that you can add, which would be a low cost service? It could be something like pizza making, some kind of supper club, or something that you could set up that could be really good for your guests, because they'll see it as really valuable, see it as a way of them saving money than going out to big restaurants or whatever. And so that helps you, it helps them, and it means that your bookings will be more positive in those areas, and you could attract people to your site because you're offering those additional extras. So in the United Kingdom, it was really interesting to note during the summer that holiday cottage websites were offering significant discounts on thousands of properties. So this is during peak summer weeks. And if they're doing that, that's indicating a drop in occupancy, because they're seeing that if they don't get their occupancy up, they're not going to get paid, because they're getting commission-based fees. So this means they only get paid a fee if they actually sell a holiday for the holiday owner, the location owner. And so if they are not getting the bookings that they need, that starts to make them panic, because they need those bookings. That's how they're going to get paid. So they start dropping the prices across their online travel agent platform. And then the whole idea is to bring in new people and hopefully some new bookings, and to keep their income at the level that they want to keep it. So major providers like cottages.com and Sykes Holidays, Cottages had availability in thousands of properties with discounts of up to 20% and more. And this contrasts with the surge in prices during the pandemic, which impacted in 20 and 21. So that's really interesting to know that those really big online travel agents had a lot of availability. They were dropping their prices, they were giving lots of discounts. And that means that they were struggling to get the bookings they needed. So if you are a glamping owner, glamping site owner, or if you're a unique holiday rental owner, and you didn't have quite the bookings you were hoping for this year, then you're not the only one. This year has been a tricky year in the UK, and there was some really interesting things happening in the industry that was having an impact on a lot of people. So while late bookings increased, overall occupancy levels declined due to an excess of available properties. So we also saw during the pandemic, there were a lot of people who bought property because there was a reduction in stamp duty. They bought the property, they decided to book it out, not as a local rental, so not a local person renting it, but instead putting it out as holiday accommodation, which means that the listings had increased significantly. So the number of properties in the supply chain were above the amount of demand. So again, basic economics, supply and demand was out of whack, which means that this is going to have an impact on the industry. So one of the things the government is looking at the moment is a licensing scheme. They are consulting on it in the UK. The idea behind it is that with a licensing scheme in place, they can keep an idea or an eye on the number of properties in any one area which is offering holiday accommodation. Because if it gets to be too much holiday accommodation, then obviously that's going to impact the local rental market and renters. But it also means that it could have a negative impact on the local area that is very quiet during low tourism season, and then incredibly busy the rest of the time. So they have decided they need to manage it. It's also due to the fact that during COVID, they wanted to speak to the owners of all of these different holiday accommodation units to share information about keeping guests safe and everything else, but they didn't have one way of doing that to be able to communicate with people. So they have decided to have the licensing scheme, but it's out for consultation. I think it's still being debated, and if they agree to go ahead with it, it means that you will have to apply for the license and then you'll get a number, and that license number is the only way you will be able to advertise your property on places like booking.com, Airbnb, and so on. So it means that you have to register your property. So some people who have been maybe operating under the radar, that could be a big impact for you. And other people who haven't been, they've gone through planning and everything else, then that'll be fine. So it's about looking at and keeping an eye on what's happening. So that's all going to impact over the next year or so. So that's worth keeping an eye on for everybody. And I think it will have a mixed impact depending on the final scheme that they roll out, if they roll it out at all. So it's worth remembering that where challenges exist, there are always opportunities, and we've seen that time and time again. I've seen it time and time again with the people that I've interviewed for my podcast episodes. There's 2 podcasts now, so you can actually look on any of your platforms, your podcasting platforms that you like to listen to, and download from there. It's all free and available. You can stream while you're in the car or walking the dog or doing the cleaning or tending your land or sorting your marketing in the office. Whatever it is you're doing, you can have a listen to those podcasts. So the Glamping Americas podcast, I'd really like you to listen to episode 10, because this talks about some new research that has been done for the American market to look at specifically the glamping market in America. Now, this is only for America, but it's really interesting results that other parts of the world might want to dip into, because it talks about what is the potential for this industry and where is it going. And it takes a lot of input from a lot of sources. And so it's really interesting outcomes. And many of the results say that it's still got a lot of potential for growth. So that's something you might want to listen to. That's episode 10 on the Glamping Americas podcast. If you just put my name, Sarah Riley, into your podcasting streaming platform, and then you'll probably find that both of them will come up, both of my podcasts. So this is the Glamping Americas podcast. You'll recognize these graphics if you go to your podcasting platform. And then this is the Business of Glamping and Unique Holiday Rentals podcast. And this has got all kinds of really interesting interviews with some fascinating people who are doing great things in this industry. And, you know, businesses who have been able to generate queues of guests and a 2-year waiting list at a time when the industry was really struggling, and a time when people were finding it quite challenging after the big demands post-pandemic suddenly dipped. Some people did really incredibly well and others didn't and have struggled. And why is that? So we dive into that and dissect that a little bit on the podcast. So go and find that. It would be great to have you download it and join me on the podcast, or alternatively here where you are hanging out now. I am endeavoring to share some more content and some more data around the industries, glamping, unique holiday rentals, but also the different techniques hosts are using to attract their guests. And some of those techniques are things that I've been teaching for a long time now, and I love and adore. And I'm going to definitely be doing more on in the future. And it's about offering events and retreats. And some of the successes that businesses have had with that over the years have just been astounding. And I want other people to benefit from it. But don't think that it's as easy as just saying, I'm going to run an event, because that's not the way it works. If you want a profitable event, then you need to do it slightly differently. So make sure you tune in, follow, subscribe, whatever it is. I'd really love to have you join me for that. And in the meantime, have a fantastic Christmas and New Year. Take care, and I will see you soon.